Hi, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic, a fantasy writer's kit bag. I'm fantasy writer Neil Mack, the author of Moondog and the Reed Leopard, and I want to share my love of folklore, local history and nature mythology with writers and creatives like you on my regular podcasts. It's designed with fellow indie publishers and writers in mind, but all fans of fantasy fiction are very welcome to join in. In my fantasy writer's kit bag, writers, artists and creatives will find lots of ideas and discussion about things such as potions, dark arts, fabulous creatures, folktale studies, nature lore, and the interesting history behind the myth and magic that underpins our understanding of the fictional universe. Happy Diwali, everybody! So, this week I've been kept alive, and to some extent kept awake too, by the celebrations around the Hindu festival of Diwali, Diwali. If you don't live in a community that has Hindu families, then this may be something that you've missed. But here in the West London districts, and also out in East London as well, there are large Hindu communities. And therefore, Diwali is something that we've got used to. I once asked a friend of mine, a Hindu friend, what Diwali meant to him, and he said, well, the best way to describe it is it's like Christmas and New Year rolled together and come as one. So, what is Diwali? Well, Diwali is the Hindu festival of lights. It typically lasts 5 days, although the 3 most holy days are towards the end. And it's celebrated during the Hindu lunar solar month of Kartika. Diwali symbolises the spiritual victory of light over darkness, and therefore good over evil, and also, I suppose, knowledge over ignorance. And therefore it's associated with the goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of prosperity. Lakshmi is the wife and the energy to the supreme being in Hinduism, known as Vishnu. It's thought, by the way, that Vishnu descended onto Earth as an avatar. Those of you who are Avatar fans might want to know that. Although Lakshmi, his wife, was born from the oceans on our planet. Anyway, back to Diwali. Diwali is celebrated on the darkest night of the traditional month of November. Of course, it's not called November in Hindi, but our month of November. And this is after the summer harvest, and it is designed to coincide with the new moon. The word means, in Sanskrit, a series of lights. It's the climax of 3 days of prayer and a huge party with lots of fireworks here in the UK and around the world. Diwali is not only celebrated by Hindus, by the way, but also by Jains, Sikhs and Nuar Buddhists. I've always thought that it's interesting that Diwali is on or around our own Anglo-Christian celebration of Hallowe'en, and also quite near to our bonfire night here in Britain of 5th of November. Coincidentally, perhaps, the Jews also have a festival, the Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, and around about the same time, although the period of Hanukkah could start in November and could be sometime in the first 2 or 3 weeks of December. But you'll see public menorahs around the United States at around Hanukkah time. I've often wondered, is this because from around 31st of October onwards, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we enter a darker half of the year, and this is a liminal period. And this is where the normal boundaries, perhaps, between this world, our earthly world, and the other world, is so thinned that active spirits and fairies and perhaps other spiritual entities can move easily, perhaps without any limitation at all, across the thresholds from one world into the other. For example, common tradition at the start of the darker half of the year is that the souls of dead relatives might try to visit their earthly homes. So do flames and smokes and ashes, and of course all the lights that you put on, have some kind of protective and cleansing powers? And is that why at Diwali we aim to keep the lights on all night? Is that why at Diwali we try to frighten away the darkness and the evil spirits by our use of fireworks and candles and lanterns? Diwali. So I wanted to move straight on to the festival of All Hallowe'en. All Hallowe'en was actually a 3-day Christian observance celebrated on the 31st of October to remember in prayers the saints, which is the Hallows, and the martyrs and all the faithfully departed. So All Hallowe'en is actually a 3-day celebration, it's not just one night. It's widely held that many Halloween traditions originate from the ancient Celtic harvest festivals, and particularly the Gaelic festival of Samhain. However, some Christian academics have held that Halloween began solely as a Christian feast. The word Halloween, or Hallowe'en, dates from quite recently, only about 1745, and literally means the evening before All Hallows. And All Hallows date is the 1st of November, and it's the festival of all the saints, in other words, all the Hallows and the martyrs. And in Scots, the word Eve is normally pronounced as even, to rhyme with St. Stephen, and that's where the E''en comes from shortening the word even. So really you should say All Hallowe'en. And Samhain, which I was talking about just now, actually comes from the old Irish word from summer's end. So it may not be as dark and scary as it sounds. It's not anything to do with black magic, for example. It's just about the end of the summer. Anyway, across Britain, special bonfires were lit at All Hallowe'en, and there were rituals involving these bonfires. Flames, smoke and ashes were deemed to have protective and cleansing powers. In some places, torches lit from the bonfire were carried sunwise around the home or the field to protect it. In Wales, bonfires were once lit at this time of the year to prevent the souls of the dead from falling to earth. And on the Isle of Man, the festival of All Hallowe'en is known as Hop to Na. From at least the 16th century, and probably from long before that, the festival of All Hallowe'en has included mumming and guising in Celtic Britain, and that's to say in Ireland, Scotland, the Isle of Man and Wales. So if anyone tries to tell you that it's an American import, they're actually quite wrong. Doorstepping, going door to door, is actually part of a long-held tradition. Mumming and guising involves people of the community going house to house in costume or in disguise, which is the guising bit, to recite verses and songs in exchange for food. It's very closely linked to the impersonation of the soul of the dead trying to come to the house and being offered gifts on behalf of the living to stop them entering across that threshold. Do you remember I said earlier about it's a belief that perhaps spirits are trying to enter the house again? Impersonating spiritual or elemental beings or wearing a disguise is also believed to protect ourselves from those same spirits at this dark time. In Scotland, youths went house to house with blackened faces, and they often threatened to do mischief unless they were welcomed or bribed. It's claimed by academics that these blackened faces came from the charcoal ash that the youths found in the sacred bonfires. So Bonfire Night, which we now celebrate on the 5th of November, and I'll come to next week, is also part of the All Hallowe'en tradition. Anyway, in the British Isles, pranksters often used to use hollowed out turnips or manglewurzels, often carved with grotesque faces, as lanterns, and this was especially true when they went mumming. And that's another tradition that people think came over here with American pop culture and with American television, but it didn't. In the British Isles, the use of turnips, carved out turnips as lanterns, was used possibly since the 16th century, probably before that. In Somerset, in southwest England, All Hallowe'en is known as Punky Night, or Pooky Night, Pooky, in Irish culture. "Give me a candle, give me a light, if you don't want, you'll get a fright," the kids used to say when they were dressed up in their masks or blackened faces. And a punky, or a pookie, is a lantern. A punky is a lantern by the southwest English tongue. And the idea of punkies gradually spread across to other parts of Britain and generally became known as jack-o'-lanterns. So, let's pass quickly to jack-o'-lanterns. They're part of the All Hallowe'en tradition. The name may well derive from a chap called Stingy Jack. Stingy, S-T-I-N-G-Y, Jack. And the story goes that on the night of Halloween, the devil went out to find Stingy Jack. Jack was out and about, drunk and wandering around as usual, and he was crossing through the countryside at night when he came across a body which was laying in front of him on the path. This body had an eerie grimace on its face. This eerie-faced thing turned out to be Satan. Jack realised that this was the end of his life on Earth, and that Satan had finally come to collect his malevolent soul. But Jack made a last request. He asked Satan to let him drink ale before he departed to Hades. So Satan took him to the local pub and got him filled up with liquor, and when he was completely sloshed, Satan turned himself into a silver coin to pay the landlord. But Jack stole the coin, and thus Satan, and kept him, or it, in his pocket. So Jack, if you like, imprisoned Satan. Anyway, when he eventually died, Stingy Jack went to heaven, but St. Peter stopped him at the pearly gates and said he couldn't enter heaven because of his sinful lifestyle and his drinking. So he went down to hell, but Satan was not willing to allow him admission into hell either. Satan said he could not come into the underworld because of one fact, and that is that Satan could not take his soul. He'd already tried once, and he'd failed. He was tricked. So, to warn everybody else and to warn others of such an act of deceitfulness, Satan gave Jack an ember and marked him a denizen of the netherworld. And from that day on until forever, Jack has been doomed to roam the place between the planes of good and evil, with only an ember inside a hollowed turnip as his life force. Jack-o'-lantern. Happy Halloween, everybody. Fantasy fiction news. Last week I was going through the definitions of a county and a duchy and also a shire, and we were explaining the differences between those three. And I quickly touched on why Durham is called County Durham. It's because it has a very interesting history. It was once a county run by a bishop. Anyway, this week in the news, we learn about Auckland Castle, which sounds like it should be in New Zealand, but it's not. It's near Durham. Auckland, A-U-C-K-L-A-N-D Castle, is a palace of the Prince Bishops of Durham County. And the Prince Bishops were, if you remember from last week, the surrogate kings who governed the north of England for more than 750 years. Anyway, the reason that the Auckland Castle is in the news is that it was bought from the Church of England by an investment banker, a chap called Jonathan Ruffer, in 2012. And it became part of a historical charity project called the Auckland Project, which is using art, faith, history and heritage to transform not only the Auckland Castle, but also the surrounding area into a tourist destination. Anyway, David Madden, the chief executive of this project, said that the reopening of Auckland Castle to the public will be on the 2nd of November, so next week. And it will be a very big moment for us. And visitors to Auckland Castle can learn about the bishops who lived and entertained at Auckland Castle over the centuries. Other offerings from the Auckland project will include a deer park, a viewing tower, a gallery for temporary art shows, and a short walk away towards a mining art gallery. Auckland Castle, so it should be really interesting. It looks like a really beautiful Georgian Gothic type building, not dissimilar to Eton, and I'd like to visit it quite soon, so I thought I'd keep you up to date on that. Auckland Castle, County Durham. fantasy writer's definition. This week, liminal. Liminal, Liminal, is taken from the Latin limen, Limen, meaning doorstep, and it pertains to the threshold of something. In other words, it pertains to the beginning or the first stage of a process. Thus, at All Hallowe'en tide, we celebrate the liminal point of the year. This is where the light part of the year and the dark half of the year are joined together. So in that case, the liminal point is also the point of entry because it marks the boundary of something. Therefore, at the liminal point of Halloween, which is precisely midnight on the eve of All Hallows, that marks the moment when a spirit or an entity might move from one side of the threshold to the other, because it's the liminal point. Several words come from liminal, but one which we use every now and again, especially in advertising, is subliminal, when a message comes through across the boundaries without us noticing. Liminality is the feeling of ambiguity or the feeling of disorientation that one might experience in the middle stage of a rite of passage. So in sacred rites, during a liminal stage, religious participants will stand at the threshold of something that's about to happen. And as a Christian, at the service of Mass, we approach that liminal stage when we get to the most important part of the rite, which is the transubstantiation of the bread and wine into the body and blood. Stories in folklore suggest that some characters or entities can only be killed within a liminal space. For example, the Welsh mythological hero, Llw, could not be killed unless he was halfway between one activity and another. So if he was running, he couldn't be killed. If he was sleeping, he couldn't be killed. But when he was just waking and he was on the way to go for a run, that was his danger moment. Likewise, the forest spirit can only be killed when he switches between two forms. So the liminal is not just a place, it's also a state of mind. And gods and goddesses can interact with humans if they both inhabit the same kind of liminality at the same time. This is often why ancient cultures believed in dream catching, because it was considered to be a part of this liminal process. In the Twilight saga of books by Stephanie Meyer, each book tells of a liminal period. For example, there's Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn. And Charlotte Bronte's novel, Jane Eyre, follows the protagonist through different liminal points in her life as she crosses the threshold from student to teacher and then from teacher to woman. Psychologists suggest that the reason we sometimes experience difficulty trying to make sense of jet travel, especially intercontinental jet travel, is because airplane travel is inherently liminal. When you travel by jet, you're neither here nor there, and you're crossing through thresholds of time and space, with the actual flight shifting our own existence into some kind of limbo space. So a liminal place is also a limbo space. If you remember, I mentioned earlier about Jack-o'-lantern, not allowed to go into heaven and not allowed to go into hell. Where is he? He's in a liminal state. Liminal. Fabulous creature of the week. This week, the Yali. A Yali, Y-A-L-I, is a liminal being. The Yali often appear as a leogryph, Leogryph, which is part lion and part griffin, but with bird-like features. But Yali can also appear as part lion and part elephant, and even part lion and part horse, or part elephant and part horse. When they are elephant and lion joined together, they can be powerfully strong. And when they're powerfully strong, then they can be protectors. According to the traditional Indian system of architecture, there are 16 types of Yali. You'll see them at the entrances to temples and shrines and pagodas all across Asian countries, but they're especially noticeable in Indian architecture. Also known as the protector, The icons of Yali have been found on the entrance walls of temples for hundreds of years, and it's thought that they were perhaps there to defend and guard the sacred nature of the space within. For example, in the Meenakshi Ammun temple, there are 1,000 Yali, and in this sense, in architecture, Yali are used like grotesques, for example, gargoyles. And grotesques were used in architecture to define that which is almost indefinable, and that is that ugliness and brutishness and evil are also part of God's kingdom, although they stay on the outside and all the angels and the cherubs go on the inside of a temple. But it does make me wonder, were Yalis once created perhaps to be a fighting force? If you're writing some fantasy fiction now, think about that. Think about wizards or perhaps even scientists creating a biological fighting force of creatures that are part elephant and part lion. Imagine how powerful they'd be. Or did these creatures once naturally exist and they've since become extinct? But if they did once exist, were they recruited to protect man and to protect his temples? The fabulous creature of the week, the Yali. Wildflower of the week. This week, Neeps. So this week I want to talk about Neeps or Swedes or rutabagas. I'll explain why they're called Swedes in a moment. But rutabagas are a white turnip or a root vegetable that originated as a cross between a cabbage and a turnip. The roots of Neeps, N-E-E-P-S, are eaten in various ways. They can be boiled and diced, and the leaves can be eaten as a leaf vegetable. The roots and tops are often used as winter feed for livestock. Neeps derives from a shortening of the word turnips, and in North East England, turnips and Swedes are colloquially known as snadgers or snaggers, or sometimes narkies. Botanists believe that the root crop originated in Sweden in about the 17th century, which is why it's also known as a Swede in English. It was introduced into North America in the early 19th century. And due to its use as a winter feed for animals, it's often considered to be a food of last resort, and especially due to its association with the food shortages of World War I and World War II, and its affiliation with the poor peasant classes who worked in the fields. Nevertheless, in Scotland, it's separately boiled and mashed with potatoes and served at special events, markedly Burns Night, by the way, but also Hallowe'en. When turnips are boiled with potatoes, they're known as neeps and tatties. And they're very nice indeed, by the way, with some haggis. Neeps mashed with carrots, by the way, are known as clapshot, all one word, C-L-A-P-S-H-O-T. In England, a Swede is boiled together with carrots and served either mashed or pureed with butter and ground pepper. Yum. In fact, we often have this at home on Sundays with our Sunday roast dinner. And this combination of Swedes boiled with carrots is the main ingredient within a Cornish pasty. If you've never had a Cornish pasty, when you come to visit England and you go down to Cornwall to visit the land of King Arthur and the land of the Celts, go and have a Cornish pasty. In Canada, homesteaders often add neeps to mincemeat and Christmas cake to add filler. And my mum, when she used to make Christmas pudding, which is also known as plum pudding at Christmas time, she used to add carrots to the Christmas pudding. So it doesn't surprise me that you could also add neeps. The people of Ireland and Britain have long carved turnips and used them as lanterns, not only at Hallowe'en, but when they do use them at Hallowe'en, it's to possibly ward off harmful spirits. In medieval times, these carved neep faces were known as tumpshy heads, T-U-M-S-H-I-E heads, tumpshy heads. In modern times, and certainly since the 1990s, because they became readily available, pumpkins are often used in place of turnips. And of course, as we all know, they're carved to look as sinister and threatening as possible. And the tradition is you put them at your window or on a doorstep, and the idea is that at all Halloween tide, they will ward off evil spirits. Neeps.